Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 4, Episode 24, Body Parts. This episode first aired June 10th, 1996. Before we start on this one, anything to say about last week's podcast, The Quickening?
It was perfect, if not the grimmest episode of all time.
Absolutely, the grimmest episode. Maybe not the saddest, but the grimmest.
Yeah.
This one is like Boomerang, Whiplash, opposite. The only thing missing from an opposite to that one would be Lwaxana Troi.
Oh.
But she is not here. Well, should we get started?
I think we should.
In the cold open, Dax and Worf are giving Miles a hard time about worrying about Keiko. She was off on some mission with Kira and Bashir to explore the botanical mysteries of Torad 5. Miles can't believe she wants to be in the Gamma Quadrant as a pregnant woman, or rappel down some cliffs in Bajor to gather fungus samples.
I would also question why people would want to be in the Gamma Quadrant.
I agree. Yeah. Why would anyone want to be in the Gamma Quadrant? Last week, Bashir was all gung-ho about the beauty of it, remember? But nothing good has happened in the Gamma Quadrant.
It's the quadrant of the galaxy where bad things happen.
Yeah. Miles says something about having to remind Keiko that she's pregnant, which Dax is like, oh yeah, I'm sure the morning sickness and the stretch marks is not enough for her to remember. And Miles is just like, fine, and walks off.
Dax was picking on him a little.
Then we go to Quarks, and Quark seems very happy to see Rom and pours him a snail juice on the house, so we know something is wrong.
Yeah, that's just completely out of character.
Absolutely. Quark says, we're celebrating. He just returned from Ferengi, where he learned that he's dying. Big drama, as everyone in the bar looks at him, and we cue the theme song.
Suddenly, everything goes quiet.
Yep.
I was surprised that Rom's reaction wasn't, can I have the bar now?
Well, remember, Rom's moved on. He's got a new job. He's trying to look at different things so that he doesn't always have to just think about the positives of his brother dying.
Something that happened here we haven't seen for a while is Morn is basically in the middle of the scene, just a little bit out of focus. And if you remember earlier on, we did that all the time. Morn would like be behind someone or walking in the background.
Lingering.
Yeah. Out of focus, but you could see him there.
Yep.
I feel we need more of this.
Okay. So Quark took his annual insurance physical, and he learned that he has something called Doric Syndrome, which is incurable and extremely rare. He only has a few days to live, which is extreme, according to this doctor he saw in Ferengi, Dr. Orpax.
Yeah.
He assumes that this doctor is the best because he's the most expensive. When Rom suggests that he gets another opinion, Quark brushes it off. He's like, how good could Bashir be? He doesn't even charge.
I think this might be another one of those intrinsic flaws with the Ferengi.
Agreed.
Confusing the price or the cost with actual quality or value.
Yes. And if he just opened his eyes and looked around or listened to the stories about the things that Bashir has been able to do, you would think he'd maybe put a little stock in that, but no, it has nothing to do with that. It's just money.
The Ferengi themselves are the biggest marks for con men.
Oh, that's a good point, because they don't consider all of the options.
Yeah.
Well, he's only got 6 days to take care of his will, Moogie's pension, plan his own funeral, and pay off his debts. Even though he has a lot of debts, he intends to only pay off the ones to Ferengi because of some stupid rule of acquisition. A contract is a contract is a contract, but only between Ferengi.
I like how Rom replied, that's a lot of debts, brother.
Yeah.
But also, this is another case of why would you ever do business with a Ferengi if in their cultural, religious texts that they live their lives by, they actually have, you can just break contracts with non-Ferengi.
Right.
You'd never ever want to do business with them.
Yeah.
It would be pointless for any other race to do business with the Ferengi. If this open rule is, oh yeah, you can break a contract, it means nothing.
Yeah, there are so many contradictions in the way the Ferengi try to live. It doesn't make a ton of sense. To me, this is another example where we have this rule, or we came up with this rule number 17, and we're going to write an episode around it.
Yeah.
Instead of somebody really writing rules. Although we find out in this episode, these aren't that religious of rules either. But anyway, that's a different story. Rom suggests that Quark sell the desiccated remains of his corpse on the Ferengi Futures Exchange. This is something we heard about before that Ferengi weirdly do.
Yeah, and Quark was once even selling desiccated remains of somebody who wasn't actually dead yet.
That's right. Quark doubts that anyone would buy it. When Rom tries to convince him that he's more valued than he thinks, Quark laments that he's a joke on Ferenginar. Rom says he's not a joke on the station. Here he's a respected businessman and he has friends, but Quark doesn't care about non-Ferengi opinions. Rom insists he offers his remains because he's sure they'll get lots of bids.
I think the first thing that stood out to me here was Rom seemed so genuinely upset that his brother was about to die.
Yes.
When Rom 3 seasons ago was trying to push him out of an airlock.
Yes, we have covered that. That we sort of forget about that because that wasn't really the character they wanted to build with Rom.
About what? When did that happen? I don't remember that episode.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of that going on.
Yes.
The other thing I'm going to bring up here is I think we see just the huge gulf that's grown between Rom and Quark already. How the writing for Rom has just gone off on this angle very quickly. Rom cares about family, community, and the station. People are something that he now cares about. And Quark is still exactly as he was, just blinkered by his own narrow-mindedness. And these things don't have material value, so they're not worth having.
Well, Rom has finally gotten to the point where he sees that he's not getting anything from being a Ferengi.
Yeah.
And sticking with anything that goes on Ferenginar hasn't benefited him in any way.
Yeah.
He said that in that bar association episode.
Oh, right.
Like, why do people all care what anybody on Ferenginar does with your accounts? You don't have any. That's why you're not there.
Yeah.
And Quark is trying to cling to this image of who he is. And
Right.
Rom is just like, I didn't like who I was, and I didn't like what decisions were being made for me, and I actually now see I can make different decisions and behave differently, and it's okay, because I don't have anything to lose.
I really like the way they've written Rom. They've changed Rom to this point.
Yeah. Yeah, he's still a little dopey, but he's at least turned a corner.
Yeah. But that sort of dopiness is more of a good-naturedness. And he has, as we've seen before, he has a soft heart.
Yeah.
And those attributes work better in a world outside Ferenginar.
Yeah, when he was originally just dopey, he wasn't interesting. But yeah, he's more evolved now.
Right.
Now we go to Ops, and a ship comes through the wormhole, and it's an extremely damaged runabout. Bashir requests emergency transport of Kira and Keiko to the infirmary, and everyone looks at each other concerned.
Well, pretty obviously it's going to be Kira. Anytime anything bad happens, it has to be Kira who's the one who gets injured.
Yeah, that's true.
Somebody needs to be tortured, it's Miles. Getting injured, it's Kira.
Speaking of Miles, he appears to have a mullet in this episode.
I did not notice that.
Yeah, it's not a classic one, but it's definitely long in the back and short in the front, and it is not good. Well, Miles rushes to the infirmary to find an injured Major Kira, who tells him that Keiko is in surgery, but she's going to be fine. He asks about the baby, and Kira has some news. The baby is no longer in Keiko. The baby is now in Kira, and she dramatically reveals her own pregnant stomach and says, "Your son is living here now."
The baby is fine. It just had a change of address. I like that line.
That's pretty cute.
Yeah. And so I think the big thing here is we learn that the B story is about surrogacy.
Kind of. After the dramatic ad break, Bashir tells Miles and Sisko that they were overwhelmed by an asteroid field and hit by a giant rock. Keiko was thrown against the bulkhead, and even though he stabilized her, the baby's autonomic functions were failing, and the only option was to find another womb for the baby, and Major Kira's was available. That sounds terrible. And then there's some made-up medical stuff about why a Bajoran can carry a human and also why the baby can't move back to Keiko. It has something to do with the short Bajoran gestation period and how they vascularize quickly, and trying to move the baby back would be very dangerous. Do you think he asked Kira before doing this? Do we ever talk about that in this episode?
I don't think they specifically say she volunteered to do this. I would see her doing it.
I don't deny it, but it's nice to have a choice.
It's totally she takes one for the team.
Okay.
Maybe that's not the right choice of words.
That's a pretty terrible. Technically, she takes one of the team, but that's a different. Okay.
Oh, dear. Another thing here is Sisko asks, the bottom line here is it did work.
Yeah.
Because Bashir was just going off on this medical science mumbo jumbo.
Right.
And Sisko, I like the way he sort of brought it back to reality of, okay, we're not doctors. It worked, right?
Yeah. And Miles is like, so Major Kira is having my baby? That was funny too.
I noticed in this scene as well, he didn't actually say how he did the procedure.
On the runabout, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, were there instruments there?
Right, and the shuttlecraft had been damaged, so...
Yeah, how did he do that? Did he beam the baby across?
I think the writers went, yeah, let's not go there. Too difficult.
Okay.
Hand wave.
Yeah, hand wave.
So in the Gamma Quadrant, we have awful aliens, the Jem'Hadar, and asteroid fields that can overwhelm shuttles. It just keeps getting better.
We've also got those horrible aliens who throw people in prison in their minds, and we've got those other ones with the painted faces that just even beat each other up. I mean, there's nothing good there.
It seems to be
What
that
have
way.
we seen in the Gamma Quadrant? That was not terrible. And don't forget about the Quickening episode.
Oh, yeah.
Meanwhile, Quark isn't getting any takers on his remains. In fact, his only bid happens to match the exact amount of Rom's life savings.
Aw, Rom's looking out for him.
Quark is annoyed, and he starts whining about how his entire life has been a mistake. Well, whose fault is that, dude?
Everybody else's.
Yeah. Well, then another bid comes in. This time it's 500 bars of latinum for all of the remains. It's an anonymous bid, but Quark jumps on it, thinking the bid is from the Grand Nagus. Rom's not so sure the Nagus would do this, and there's a funny conversation about Quark saying the Nagus really likes him, and Rom's like, well, no, he really just uses you when he needs to.
Oh, and Quark replies, he used me because he liked me. That's some justification there.
That's, yeah.
And Rom also brings up, could the money have come from Moogie?
Oh, yeah.
I love it. Quark replies, she doesn't like me that much.
Yeah, well, why would she?
Yeah, his own mother isn't really a fan of Quark.
I have something about this in the Women in the Future section, but why would any female Ferengi do anything for a Ferengi male on Ferenginar?
Because it is their duty and it's written in the rules of acquisition.
Sigh. If you and I were in the same room, I'd throw something at you.
I'd probably have one of the foam tiles bouncing off me right now.
Right. Well, anyway, Quark says it took his whole life, but he's going to die a winner, and he accepts the bid. If that's all it takes, 500 bars of latinum to be a winner, I mean, oh my gosh.
This scene worked really well because it was funny, and I think it just beautifully encapsulated how greedy and stupid Quark could be.
Sure.
And Rom is the smart one saying, why don't you wait?
Well, except Rom is the one who got him into this, but we'll talk about that later.
Kind of.
Kind of.
I don't blame Rom alone.
It was Rom's idea, and he pushed him to do it.
Yeah, true. He did kind of encourage him to put his body on the exchange.
Uh-huh.
But it's a Ferengi cultural norm, so...
Yeah.
Rom's not completely guilty.
In the infirmary, Kira stops by to see Keiko, who is recovering from surgery. Keiko says she doesn't know how to thank her, and they kind of laugh at the absurdity of the situation.
Yeah.
Now Quark and Rom are discussing paying off Quark's debts and charging admission to his funeral, when Dr. Bashir stops by to tell him that Dr. Orpax let him know Quark's diagnosis was a mistake, and he's not actually dying. Quark is mostly excited at this point about being able to sue the doctor for malpractice. Doesn't seem to care about anything else.
Did you make note of the amount of money he had left after paying off his debts?
No.
Well, from my notes, he'd basically spent almost 60% of the latinum paying off debts to his mother.
Oh, funny.
This guy has such a crushing debt load. It's no wonder that he's permanently terrified by his cash flow position in the bar, because the debt servicing on this must be enormous. And his mother doesn't like him, so she's not going to do him any favors.
But his mother clearly is a good business person, and if he actually listened to her and worked with her, maybe he'd be doing okay. But, we can't do that.
If he was smart, he would have kept Pell around.
Well, we already have established he's not very smart. Well, now one of my least favorite characters arrives. In comes Brunt from the FCA, and he arrives at Quark's quarters to find Quark and his jammies. Turns out Brunt is the one who put in the bid for his remains, and he's here to collect. Even though he does know that Quark is no longer dying. Brunt's jacket is so bedazzled with fancy fringe. Did you see that? I thought that was pretty funny.
He's got to show off that he is a Ferengi with some money.
Yes.
He clearly was able to bribe himself into a position of power in the FCA.
Well, Quark offers Brunt a refund with some extra bars on top, but Brunt doesn't want money. He wants Quark's remains.
Yep.
He suggests that maybe Quark could have someone kill him. He says, a contract is a contract is a contract.
Once again, Quark misses reading the small print. Check those terms and conditions.
What do you mean? Because that's the rule of acquisition, not a term of the contract.
Well, selling your remains on the futures exchange, you should have some kind of get out clause that if you don't die, the contract is automatically nulled.
I see. Of that. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But that would be a smart thing to do.
Yeah. Well, it turns out Brunt has a personal grudge against Quark because of the non-Ferengi things he's done, like settling with the striking employees and protecting his mother from an audit.
He sold supplies to Bajoran refugees at cost.
Yeah, for just above cost. He calls Quark a philanthropist and says he's gone Starfleet. He actually hopes Quark does break the contract because then he'll be cut off from his own people and he'd be unable to do business with Ferengi anymore.
Well, I think you also see here how Quark has deviated despite his flaws from the Ferengi norms, where he pleads to Brunt and says, I'll remove my waitstaff's vacation time. And a shocked Brunt says, you gave them vacation?
Yeah, so he has made small steps in different directions, but it's like he hasn't admitted it to himself.
Yeah, and this all flies in the face of Brunt's cherished beliefs. He calls Quark a disease at one point.
Well, he also says that Quark's mother will be kicked out of her house and living on the streets, which is just awesome. The mothers of Ferenginar need to revolt. They have nothing, and yet they continue to give birth to these awful creatures. They need to get some phasers.
Yeah, armsurrection seems like a good idea in Ferenginar.
In the O'Brien quarters, Miles is helping Keiko recover. They talk about inviting Kira over for dinner, but Keiko doesn't think it's enough. She feels really cut off from her own child, and it's actually quite sad.
And most shockingly, this was actually some decent writing for Miles and Keiko.
Yeah, they actually communicated.
Yeah, what happened?
Rom and Quark go to see Garrick, while Rom is trying to convince Quark that breaking a contract won't be that big of a deal. Quark abuses Rom a bit here, as usual.
Well, Rom is the absolute voice of reason here, telling Quark, defying Ferengi tradition isn't too bad. I formed a union.
Yeah, but then Quark says something like, well, nobody cares about you on Ferenginar anyway. I mean, he's so mean. Well, inside Garrick's, we hear Garrick tell Morn that he added extra padding to his trousers to make swiveling on his bar stool more comfortable.
Perfect.
Turns out Quark has come to hire Garrick as an assassin. And Garrick is like, I don't do that. And Rom thinks that he wants Garrick to kill Brunt, but he actually wants Garrick to kill him, meaning Quark.
Yeah.
Quark says he wants it to be quick and painless and bloodless. And I think somehow at the end he doesn't want to be dead as well.
If you could add that in, I'm sure that would be fine.
And Garrick is like, well, now that's different, which is very funny. It's like he wasn't going to kill someone else, but he's happy to go after Quark.
Yeah. Rom is right, though, in this scene.
Yeah.
He was actually prepared to walk away from Ferengi tradition and society and become more. It makes me wonder if Rom had had someone in his life more like himself and the way he behaved towards Nog, then would Rom be the first one in Starfleet? Could he be the one who broken the cycle of Ferengi culture a generation earlier?
Probably. Quark, to me, reminds me of someone who thinks that trickle-down economics is going to work for him. Remember in the Bar Association where they talked about how the Ferengi, they never fight back against these ridiculous rules because they want to ultimately be the ones who are at the top?
One day I'll be in the mansion.
Right. And it's like you're waiting to win the lottery or something, and then I'll be in charge. But it only happens to a very tiny percentage of people. And it just reminds me of thinking that when somebody very rich and at the top tells you trickle-down economics is good for you, and you say, oh, yes, it is. Meanwhile, you don't actually get anything from it. It's like, look around and see. Yeah. That just is so Quark to me.
Yeah, that's the mindset Quark is completely stuck in.
Religiously.
Yeah, right.
I also made a note here about the Sons of Moog. And even though Garrick and Quark are not in Starfleet, I still don't think Sisko is going to want a murder on his station.
No.
I think somebody's still going to be arrested if this happens.
Well, I have the feeling, and I'd be pretty confident on this, is Garrick would make it look like a complete accident.
Yeah.
Quark was just having dinner and his neck accidentally snapped.
Yeah, right.
There's no leads, no clues, no signs of foul play. It's just something that happens to Ferengi now and then.
Yeah, maybe. Well, Rom tries to talk Quark out of this, but he's made up his mind. He says when he arrives at the gates of the Divine Treasury, the registrar will accept my bribe and usher me inside because I died as a Ferengi. And then he heads off with Garrick to make plans for his own death.
He is so misguided. Once again, we see Quark doing things that really negatively impact his own happiness.
Yes.
It's almost like, and you see this in the real world, people who are just too stubborn and just set their flag upon the hill and they're like, I'm going to die on it, even if it's the stupidest hill imaginable.
Yes. I have had conversations with people like that.
Yeah. And it makes you understand, if you like, Rom's frustration. Look, brother, look what I've done. It hasn't killed me. This will kill you.
But it doesn't matter because he still so firmly believes that he's going to be in that 1% or whatever that percentage is on Ferenginar. And he's just completely misguided. But also he sets, I think, all of his own visions of himself and his own judgments of himself based on what other Ferengi around him say. So his terrible cousins and other Ferengi that he talks to.
Well, his cousin who owns a moon is such a hero to him.
Exactly. So he's never going to get out of that unless he picks some different heroes.
Right.
Back in the O'Brien quarters, and the baby was kicking, so Kira stopped by to share the experience. Also, Kira asks them to call her Nerys, since their relationship is a bit more personal than it was a few days ago.
I would say.
They discuss that Bajorans don't get morning sickness. They sneeze uncontrollably. And then they invite her to dinner, and they say they have an idea that they'd like her to consider.
But you don't actually hear what the idea is.
Not yet.
And for the second time in this episode, we actually had what I thought was quite a good, well-written little scene with Miles, Keiko, and Kira, and wasn't really some hand-fisted sledgehammer writing.
Right, yeah.
With one or all of them coming off as like bad caricatures.
True. Well, now Quark is eating something that looks like eggs when Garrett comes up behind him and breaks his neck, letting his face fall into the food. But the real Quark appears and says, this option is no good because he could hear the bones in his neck breaking and he doesn't want that to be the last sound he hears.
Oh, and Garrett replies with, it wasn't that loud. Oh, I was laughing out loud at this.
Yeah. Well, Garrick is annoyed because Quark has an excuse for why every option doesn't work.
Yes.
Of course.
Including the poison gas smelled bad.
Yes. And eventually they settle on it being a surprise.
Yeah.
And Garrick says, that can be arranged.
Question here. I'll give you my opinion. I don't think Garrick was taking this seriously. I think he was just enjoying torturing Quark, messing with his head. I don't think Garrick intended to go through with any of this. He just enjoyed it. Sort of a little bit of, his professional past or whatever. What do you think?
Well, I hadn't thought about that. I suppose it's possible. But I figured he would do it.
Really?
But yeah, he may have been enjoying it.
Oh, I think he was definitely enjoying it.
Especially if he was thinking, well, I'm not going to get arrested for killing this doofus. So maybe I'll just toy with him for a while.
Yeah.
Until he changes his mind, because he may have known that Quark was going to chicken out.
That's my point. I think he knew Quark wasn't that serious. And leading on from that, I think he was deliberately making it unpleasant for Quark. That he wasn't doing it painlessly or seamlessly or whatever. He was deliberately doing it so Quark would be horrified.
Okay. I hadn't thought about that. Well, later, Quark is cautiously entering his own quarters, worried that Garrick might attack him at any moment.
Yes.
But he finds himself alone and eventually lies down in his bed, only to fall quickly into a dream. At first, he thinks he's dead and is at the Divine Treasurer, but eventually, Gint, the first Grand Nagus, comes out. But it appears to be Rom cosplaying as Zek.
Yes, it's actually Max Grodenchek dressed as the Nagus. What made me laugh is I thought it was like he was playing Wallace Shawn.
Well, yeah, I think he was. He was cosplaying him.
Yeah.
This fake Nagus tells Quark to break the contract with Brunt. He says the rules of acquisition were just made up by a bunch of people and put in a book. They're guidelines. Quark doesn't think he can listen to this fake Nagus because it's a dream. The fake Nagus says that he's obviously searching for a reason to break the contract, which is why he's dreaming this.
Yep.
And he gives him permission to do so. And Quark then starts to talk himself into it by saying, well, maybe this is a vision and not just a dream, and Gint really is telling me to break the contract.
That fits with Quark and the way he behaves. He has to find a way of justifying it to himself, and this is the perfect example. It wasn't a dream. It was a vision.
Yeah, it's very Quark. Then Brunt appears and tells him that's not the real Gint and reminds him he will lose everything if he breaks the contract. And then he tells Quark people have known to die in their sleep, and he starts to strangle Quark. But Quark finally wakes up and finds that he's really alive.
There were a lot of little things in this scene I thought were funny and worked well. When Gint's explaining to him about how it was just a book made up by a bunch of us.
Yeah.
And how Gint tells him that they're just suggestions, but would you buy a book called Suggestions of Acquisition? And how it was marketing, and then quotes Rule 39 at him, which was never be afraid to mislabel a product. I thought that was a great exposition of really the rules of acquisition are just something written up by some Ferengi.
Yeah. Now we go to Quarks, and Brunt is being disgusting to one of the Dabo women, so I'll just ignore that. Quark comes in with a refund for Brunt and says he's breaking the contract. And Brunt laughs and says he knew it. Just another loser in a long line of losers in his family. He tells Brunt to take his assets and get out. So Brunt shouts that Ferengi can no longer do business with Quark or be customers in this bar. He slaps a big black sticker on the wall, and Quark announces that the bar is closed, and everyone starts filing out.
Okay, so I get that the Ferengis would be forced to leave the bar.
Yeah.
Although, wouldn't most of those Ferengis already have been sanctioned because they joined a union?
Yeah.
And also, he serves Rom, who started the union, so surely he should have been kicked out of dealing with other Ferengis, so Quark shouldn't have been able to serve or deal with him.
Yeah.
And they're on a Bajoran station run by the Federation, so why can't he tell Brunt to kiss the proverbial?
Yeah.
Dispute this and keep the bar open? What are the Ferengi going to do in Bajoran space or Federation space?
No, I totally agree. I have some questions about jurisdiction in my overanalysis. It doesn't make any sense. Why would everybody else have to leave? The only thing I could think was he has so many debts to Ferengi that all of the assets in the bar were going to be used to pay off those debts.
Right.
And then he would be done doing any business. Okay. But it still didn't make any sense that he has the right to do any of that on this station, or that he can tell anybody who's not Ferengi what to do.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
I think Quark is managing to stick himself in his own self-made hell.
Yeah. I feel like he should have been prepared for this eventuality.
Yeah.
If for no other reason than just based on all the other things that have happened, since the beginning of the show, he could have prepared for something like this, but he was just always having that thought that he was somehow going to have a big windfall and he was going to make it and he was going to be the most important Ferengi ever. But he shouldn't have been thinking that.
This might be dipping into overanalysis, but he could, as he's already broken a contract, tell all the other Ferengi that he owes money to just whistle for it, because I have...
Debt's off.
Yeah, debt's off. I have no obligations to you people anymore. I've been kicked out of the Ferengi Commerce Association.
Yeah. It's like you've declared bankruptcy and you decide which debts you can pay off.
Right. And this might be further overanalysis. I'm assuming because Brunt has absolutely no morals, this works because he's holding Moogie over Quark's head. Remember how they said before, they go after the family of people on Ferenginar.
But he already said that.
Yeah.
That was gonna happen to her regardless here.
Well, that's where I'm wondering if there was some form of negotiation that if Quark settled all the debts, did whatever, gave everything up, they wouldn't go after Moogie.
Just get her off of Ferenginar and let her live her own life. And then it doesn't matter what they do there.
Yeah.
That to me is such a big part of it. And it's a thing that Ram said before. If you have nothing there, they have nothing they can take.
Exactly.
But somehow he's come here and taken all of this and threatened the mother. The Ferengi stories they're just so stupid.
There is so much hand waving. It is actually funny.
Well, they're so busy trying to make the economics of it work that they forgot that the story is really what matters.
Right.
And the economics are just dumb.
Yeah.
Back in the O'Brien quarters, we learn that they've invited Kira to live with them while she carries the baby. They tell Molly that she's Aunt Nerys, which is adorable.
Very cute. Yeah, Molly asks, "Are you my aunt?" And Miles replies, "Sounds right to me."
Yeah, that's about. Yeah, sounds good. Back to the empty bar and all of the furniture and the booze and the glassware. It's all gone.
Tables, everything.
Quark is even supposed to return the clothes he's wearing to Brunt. Again, the details of this is just very hazy.
Yeah.
But Quark is sitting sadly on the floor, broke and ruined, but Ram is proud of how he stood up to Brunt. Bashir comes in with a crate of Albanian brandy that someone gave him. And then Dax comes in with some ugly glassware that her sister sent her. Quark finds it amusing, but says he can't start a bar with just these things. But then in comes Cisco with some furniture that needs to be stored while work is being done on the habitat ring.
Very convenient timing.
Yes, and as all the furniture is coming in, Quark says, "Oh, you'll have to pay a storage fee." And Cisco says, "Send me the bill."
And did you notice, 4323, Morn is walking in with his own chair.
That's my next sentence. And Morn returns to the bar.
Carrying his own chair.
That was adorable.
Yeah.
Quark is shocked that he has friends and appears really touched by the whole scene. Of course, this is the lesson, dude. If you would invest in things that mattered, this is what you would get.
Which was the whole point of what Rom was telling him about friends, community, the station, that Quark was just blowing off.
It's a little bit of It's a Wonderful Life here at the end.
Really?
Where it's like, oh, you really are the richest man in town, even though you don't have anything. I mean, it's my least favorite Christmas movie. I do not like that movie. It's so depressing. And then at the end, you're supposed to think it's not depressing. So it's not quite that bad. But it did remind me of that.
Yeah.
Like with at the end, everybody coming in to say, oh, look, you really have all these things.
And we also see Morn back at the bar as well.
Yeah, he's pulled himself right up to the bar. The end. Over analysis?
Okay.
Yeah.
First thing, I think Quark went along with it because Moogie was used as a bargaining chip. We didn't see it, but that's my assumption.
You just get her off that planet and the chip is gone.
That would be the smartest move.
It's idiotic.
Yes. But remember, Quark is so stuck in Ferengi tradition, it almost wouldn't occur to him.
Yeah.
Like I say, a prison of his own creation.
I mean, she's not happy there. Stupid. Yeah.
Next thing.
Okay.
I think the story with Gint made perfect sense.
Yeah, that it was just made up and marketing to sell the book. 100%. Yeah.
A hook to sell something to simple marks.
It worked.
You know, like I said, they're con men.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Far from being good businessmen, the Ferengi, the majority of the Ferengi, are terrible at it and are easily exploited by other Ferengi, which I think is the truth.
Yeah, it's so funny that the Ferengi are the ones most exploited. So why would they not be the ones most suspicious?
Yeah, that I think falls to the base of it. They're just easy marks.
Yeah.
For the Ferengis who actually understand.
Yeah, I guess so.
Next thing, and this is a leap off.
Oh.
Do you think the vision with Gint was actually a real vision by the prophets? Because the prophets appear as people you know. His brother is Gint, Brunt appearing. Quark's role in Deep Space Nine is not over.
I don't think so. I don't know why the prophets would care at all about Quark. I have no reason to think that they would. So I don't think so. Yeah. I think it makes much more sense that he's having a dream and he's doing the thing that Quark always does, which is making an excuse to do a thing that he wants to do. So I think it fit more into that theory that, yes, he was just dreaming, but he was using it to convince himself of something.
Okay.
Do you think it was a vision from the prophets?
I think it could be.
We haven't seen anything up to this point that would lead me to believe that the prophets would come to the station and try to change Quark's mind about something.
Well, they're aware of who Quark is.
Yes, but Quark had to promise that the Ferengi would stay away from the prophets, basically. Yeah. So why would they then seek him out?
Because maybe he has something in the future that is a benefit to the emissary. And that's not giving any spoilers for the future.
Well, it feels like a reach.
I'm not making convincing enough argument.
No, I'm struggling to understand why the prophets would care.
Considering the rest of the hand waving. Okay, we'll put this one under. That's really hand wavy.
Okay.
And my final thing, because there's not a lot of analysis on this one.
No, it's pretty light.
I can't decide if for Sisko this was a humanitarian gesture or a very strategic move to benefit his position on the station. My personal opinion is this is very strategic. The bar is important for the mixing of Bajorans and the Federation. We always see Starfleet personnel in there along with the Bajorans, so it serves a purpose. And the other thing is, and I wonder if Odo actually did a presentation to him, pointing out that he can keep a handle on all the criminal activity in the sector by monitoring Quark's bar. So, from Sisko's perspective, it was an important asset to his job, as it were. And the opposite side is, if it was a humanitarian gesture, Sisko may feel some guilt about pushing Quark into this situation. He blackmailed him to stay, basically. And so maybe Sisko is feeling a little bit of guilt about doing that and what the ultimate outcome has become. Personally, I'm leaning towards Sisko was doing this because it was a smart move and strategically important for his job.
Well, I hadn't thought about any of those things that you said. You always think about way more complicated things than I do when it comes to stuff like this. But I think it's a legitimate question. In episode 1 of season 1, The Emissary, Sisko does blackmail Quark into staying and called him a business leader. And it was important that things started to happen on the promenade that would bring people back to the station and convince people to stay on the station, whatever. So I think there was that need in the beginning. Does he still have that exact need for Quark's bar? Probably not. You probably could get somebody else to run the bar.
Yeah.
But I like this thought that Odo and him were talking about it, and he's like, I learn a lot of stuff from Quark.
Yeah.
I can keep my eye on him. He's got his fingers in a lot of things, and the people who come through that bar, I learn a lot of stuff. It's useful. So I can see that as being a reason alone for them to find a way for the bar to stay open. At the same time, I think Sisko has learned a lot about the Ferengi through Nog and Jake's relationship. And he may very well be taking something from that relationship because he's talked to Jake about it quite a bit. Like, we can never find common ground with the Ferengi. Yeah. I don't know if it will ever happen. But he's maybe at this point seeing an opportunity to have some common ground with the Ferengi.
Bridge that gap.
Though, yes, he's cut off, but it's hard to buy that as truth.
Yeah.
But also, if he was able to form a stronger relationship with Quark and with Rom, he could show other Ferengi that the way forward is this. The progressive way is this.
Yeah.
So that could be a part of the strategic nature of what he's doing as well.
That's a good take, yeah.
I also think just generally, this is the nice thing to do. And they're trying to show that too.
Yeah.
That we all look out for each other on this station. We do things to help each other out. This was something unfortunate that happened to somebody on the station. It's not something super stupid that he did that caused it. It's just really an unfortunate. It's not like it was an accident.
Yeah.
I mean, they were kind of dumb, let's be honest. But it wasn't something terrible that he did. But now he needs help, and they're going to help him.
It was a poor personal decision.
Yeah, so it's not exactly humanitarian. This is just the nice thing to do for someone, especially someone who really is a businessman on this station that doesn't have a lot of businesses. And this is a place that people like to go.
Yeah.
Could somebody else run it? Yeah, but why not help Quark out?
And Odo.
That's just a bonus.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. There's multiple ways to look at it. Do I think this is some big strategic thing that Sisko sat down and thought about? Maybe. It could go either way, but I do think if it's something strategic, I think it has to do with him thinking this is a way to build a relationship with a Ferengi.
Yeah.
An opportunity I haven't had before.
Yeah, okay. That's also a good idea.
Yeah.
I think that wraps up my overanalysis.
Well, I only had 2 lines in overanalysis, and one was, why does Brunt have any jurisdiction to take the stuff from the station, which we already talked about.
Yep.
And then my second thing is, this entire thing is Rom's fault, because he's the one who came up with the idea for Quark to sell his remains, and then he pushed him into it. I think he thought he was going to solve the whole thing by putting up his own life savings, and it didn't work out. But I just think it was all Rom's fault.
I have to agree. Why would you take business advice from Rom?
Yeah.
When it came to saving people trapped in a pattern buffer, yeah, you probably would listen to Rom, but I don't think business is his forte.
No, 100%. Exactly. Why would you take Rom's advice on anything having to do with money?
Was in an emotionally fragile state and didn't think it through. Wait a minute. Quark never thinks it through.
Yeah. But you could argue that he was emotionally compromised because he thought he was going to die in 6 days.
True.
Okay, let's go to women in the future. And I really hope somebody asked Kira's permission to carry that baby. And Bashir didn't just do it.
Yeah.
Because she had that injury on her head. I'm like, was she conscious when this happened? Or did Bashir just decide to do it?
Oh, wow.
Because now he has to shoot her up with a bunch of hormones so that she can carry this human baby. And that's not free. That's going to have some kind of an impact on her. So I would hope she had an opportunity to agree to it.
Yeah.
But look, we haven't talked about this, but ultimately the entire reason for that story is because the actress is clearly pregnant.
Yes. Yeah.
And so in order to keep her on the show, they decided to do this rather than to try to hide it or to make Kira pregnant herself.
Yeah. I also think the story works for the character of Kira. She would do whatever it takes, no matter the cost. And I think that's what I love about her as a hero character.
Yeah.
It's her absolute sense of duty.
I don't dispute that she would agree to it.
Yeah.
I just hope that she was able to be the one who agreed to it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
People should have choices in life, and people should have choices when it comes to the use of their bodies.
What do you think of my comment earlier about the B story being a story about surrogacy?
I think it is to a small degree.
Yeah.
But they don't really explore it
Yeah.
that much. You know, the fact that it is just a B story, we don't go deep on the B stories. I think this is a great opportunity to explore something like that. I don't know if we talk about it anymore from here or not, but certainly a perfect opportunity to discuss it. But they didn't really explore it.
Yeah.
Kira was just nothing but happy in this episode. We didn't explore anything about, will she become attached to this baby emotionally?
Yeah.
I mean, if her vascular system is intersecting their blood, you know, is she going to come out of this with some human DNA? You know, they didn't go deeply into any of those things. I think it was, again, like we had a rule of acquisition and we wrote a story around it. We needed to deal with the actress being pregnant and we wrote a story around it. I'm not so sure we were thinking deeply about all of the things.
Right, because it was very surface.
But imagine how incredibly awkward this is going to be. I mean, they don't even really seem to know each other that well. They hadn't called her Nerys even. They've been on the station together for 4 years and they don't seem to be friends, which is a little bit peculiar. But suddenly now you are emotionally intertwined by this baby. It must just be very awkward.
Yeah, I guess it's strengthening the storyline of the found family. Of these are people who make their own family together.
Yeah, it is. So the last thing in this section I have is about the mother, the Ferengi mother.
Yes.
So now that Rom is no longer allowed to do Ferengi stuff because of the Union, and his mother is kicked out of her home, but what does that mean for her?
Good question.
Does anybody care?
Well, Quark probably wouldn't because she doesn't really like him. I think the feeling's mutual.
I hate the Ferengi. It's just so awful.
Yeah, we did kind of gloss over that, didn't we? Well, actually, not even gloss over it. We didn't even cover it.
As usual, we don't care. Does anybody on the station care about his mother now is maybe homeless? And by the way, homeless and not allowed to wear clothes. So is she literally out in the streets with no clothes on? And she can't ask for help because she can't talk to anyone. Oh my God, I hate the Ferengi. This is so stupid. How would this ever? It's so stupid.
Ferengi storylines don't really work for you.
No. Well, let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
I am giving it a thumbs up. I enjoyed the episode. I thought it was very good. I think this is one of the few Ferengi storylines that actually work and isn't just meh or painfully bad. And most shocking of all, it was a Miles and Keiko storyline that didn't look like it was lifted from a bad sitcom.
Yeah.
It was actually good. It worked. It seemed like they were a couple discussing things. They brought Kira in to be part of the family because Keiko felt isolated from her child. It was a really interesting, well-written look at the O'Briens. Yeah. And it worked.
Yeah, I feel like this episode was okay.
Yeah.
I agree. I thought the O'Brien story was pretty good. I mean, that's a pretty good excuse to let the actress be pregnant on the story.
Yeah.
I've watched many a show where they've just tried to hide it and it's so silly.
Or they've gone on vacation.
Or whatever, you know. So, yeah, I thought that was pretty good. And like I said, I think that's just so awkward. And I thought they played it pretty well. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty good. And the Ferengi story wasn't as horrendous and insulting as awful as they usually are. You know, they weren't harassing women in every single scene. There was one. And I'm very concerned about what they're doing with Quark's mother. But, you know, it was okay. I'd probably hover right between neutral and thumbs up. Yeah. And if you're going to round up, I guess it can be a thumb almost up.
Mostly thumb up.
But okay is my rating of this episode.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have reached the end of season 4, episode 24. Come back next week for episode 25, which is the season finale for season 4.
Then we get into season 5. And you know what comes in season 5?
What's that?
The First Contact special edition episode of ReBinge.
Oh, yes. We have talked about doing a recording of First Contact, since it happened in real time
Yes.
during season 5 of Deep Space Nine. So we will be doing that.
Between 2 episodes.
The other thing we'll be doing is we're going to have a conversation with Brian from Talk Through Media, because Brian pitched an idea for a story that turned into the final episode of the season, Broken Link, I think it's called.
Yes.
So we are going to have a conversation with Brian. He told me on Messenger that he's been waiting for a long time to talk about this. So we're going to have a conversation with Brian. All right. In the meantime, you can send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode. Or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com or tweet us at ReBingeIT. We're also on Instagram at ReBingeIT. You can check us out on TalkThroughMedia.com, where you can listen to all of the different podcasts in our network, and you can leave feedback for all of those different podcasts. There is a pod on there about Star Trek Prodigy that James and I did, even though that show is on hiatus right now. But there are also podcasts for Discovery and Picard and Strange New Worlds. We're covering all of Star Trek.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.